What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Laying the Points with Farley Betts and a brand new show on the Laying the Points podcast, which is the contest show, which we will do every Wednesday during the NFL season, focusing mostly on survivor contests. We can also talk about ATS contests. So, very excited to be on this new podcast with you. Mondays will be the recap show, our thesis statements on every NFL game. Wednesday is the contest show, and then Friday will be our full analysis and leans on every single NFL game. My name is Chris R. Farley. You can follow me on X at Farley Bets. You can get all my plays at Substack. That's farleybets.substack.com. It's a Wednesday. It's October 1st. There's a chill in the air immediately. There is less humidity. It's awesome. As soon as it was a really bad, there you go. As soon as October hits, the weather's nicer. I mean, it is easily my favorite month of the year. Halloween is near. I'm rhyming. I don't even know it. It happens to be my birthday in October. Great weather. Football's on. The NBA starts in about a month, which I actually had mixed feelings about because then my plate, I should say, really becomes full. That being said, we will talk about Survivor contests on the show. We have a great guest on the first contest show, Ryan Reynolds, a writer, specialist in awards and Survivor contests over there at Establish the Run. My friend, fellow Giants fan, the Oracle of the Garden State is what I call him. I think you should call him that too. And let's get to the show. Before I get to the show, let me just mention, man, I put up a WNBA free play on Substack. That was a loser, going through a little bit of a cold streak right now. Annoying. The game 5, Aces and Fever. Boy, the pace in that game was wild. They never slowed down. Seemed like they were hitting every shot. And not to, undermine or underestimate what the women in the WNBA can do, but when you combine the nerves and the tension of a game 5, a deciding playoff game series, the other two deciding games in playoff series went barely over 140 points. So I really liked the under in that one. We saw the under hitting some big spots in the WNBA playoffs. Last night, that did not happen. Actually went into overtime and I think hit 200 points. So we were way off in that one. We will not be way off in week 5. Coming off a bad week 4. Looking forward to week 5. Already multiple plays up on Substack and Sports Memo. And of course, you can get all of my leans on Friday when I do the full week 5 preview. Okay. I will also preview the Thursday night game on these Wednesday shows, and I'll do that at the end of the podcast. So let's get to the contest stuff first, because I have 3 points to make on this opening show, and then we'll get to some of the teams I'm considering in Survivor this week. Strategy will be a part of every show. Because especially as the season goes on, different strategies, right? Different segments of the season necessitate different strategies, and we will discuss those every week. I mean, there are full podcasts, websites, etc., dedicated to just winning Survivor contests, which is interesting that there is that much content to talk about, but there really is, right? Because between picking the actual teams and the strategy week to week, there's a lot to be said. I'm going to start off. I'm actually going to take a little sip, because my mouth, maybe it's the lower humidity, but I'm drier than usual over here. The first point I want to make is this. This is the point in the NFL season where you need to make a journey map. Like, you need to plan out the rest of your season. It doesn't have you don't have to stick to it, but you should at least know ideally who the teams are that you want to pick every week. I say the part about remaining flexible for a reason, because it's true. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Now, this is especially true, your journey map, your outline of the entire season and your picks every week. This is especially true if you have a Thanksgiving and Christmas game to think about. In Circa Survivor, you got both. I know in some other leagues, like I think on Splash, you have to start to pick 2 teams every week at a certain point. So you need to strategize, you need to plan ahead, and you need to make sure that you have certain teams in certain spots. It's going to be really crucial on Thanksgiving, really crucial on Christmas if that's part of your Survivor contest. But even without those extra weeks, it's absolutely urgent that you do that now, because There are some weeks, like I don't know if you can see my board behind me, but there are some weeks where the opportunities are very thin. There just aren't a lot of easy to decipher matchups about who's going to win and who's not. And there's a few liabilities that I have pointed out. I mean, just off the top of my head here, what I'm looking at on my board, week 7, for example, is a liability. There's just not as many teams who I might want to pick. So I have an ideal route, an ideal map of what you want to choose every week. Not that you have to stick to it, but it's really important. I also want to say my second point is that a fundamental mistake that most people make in Survivor Contest is they have an emphasis always on saving great teams. Now, you do have to save certain teams per se, right? You do have to have top tier teams in certain spots throughout the season because you just can't depend on more mediocre and especially below average teams, right? That makes sense. It all makes sense. At the same time, let's take, for example, the Buffalo Bills. If you look at the Buffalo Bills' full schedule all season, a lot of their opportunities are early in the season. Even last week, right, hosting the Saints, they end up winning. That was not an easy game for them, but they end up winning. Throughout the NFL season, especially this year, there will be spots where you're going to want to take the Bills, but you don't need the Bills as much as you may think you do later in the season. A team like the Bills, for example. Now, there are some teams, right, asterisk, there are some teams where I would say you do need to save them. I believe the Lions are a team you need to save for multiple reasons. You're not going to give them all away, but I think the Lions are a team that you must save. But throughout the season, the reason why you shouldn't just be emphasizing and just focusing on saving great teams is because your principal aim is to survive, right? So if your mentality, especially early in the season, is like, okay, well, I can't pick this team, even though this is a good pick, because I absolutely need them later in the year, and then you end up losing, right? Because you're not focused enough on just getting to a certain point in the season. And why do I say that? Well, if you get to a certain point, I would say around week 8 in the NFL season, more opportunities will arise inherently because of the nature of the NFL schedule. Think about it. Intangibles, right? A coach is diagnosed with cancer. I mean, some of these things are really sad, but these things happen, right? Someone dies. There's a catastrophe in a major city where an NFL team is. Teams will respond. You know, these are the points where like all these guys are professional football players, right? And teams with extra motivation, that extra intangible edge that you might not ever consider taking in your plan, in your look ahead schedule. You might not plan on taking those teams in week 10, 11, 12, whenever these intangibles pop up. But suddenly there's a brand new shiny opportunity to take advantage of a team that is going to be ultra motivated heading into a battle. I bring up when I talked to Ryan Reynolds, John Madden, when he died years ago, and the Raiders, who were not a good team that season, they played so well. They covered, I believe they won in response to John Madden and his passing away. Now, I know it might sound a little grotesque. It might sound a little messed up to think about things like that, but inevitably, every season, intangible scenarios that give another team an edge show up, and you have more opportunity as the season goes on. You have more opportunity as the season goes on too because of injury, right? Let's take a team like the Tennessee Titans who have yet to win a game. If the Titans are playing the Texans and CJ Stroud is out of the game, or maybe his key wide receivers and another offensive lineman are out of the game, or there's some kind of circumstance where maybe he's playing with the flu, 104 fever, can barely function out there. There could be opportunities where even a stinky team, and the Titans look like the stinkiest, maybe they're at home. Maybe you consider taking them. Maybe it's an extra spot that you have not anticipated. So injuries happen, injuries to one side of the ball to give another team who has a great unit on one side of the ball an advantage. That happens. Teams also become more desperate, right? The playoffs are looming. There are must-win games. There also are travel spots, and you can forecast some of that. But sometimes travel spots and like difficult scenarios are tough to see, especially if, like, let's say a bad team gets a great win. So all of a sudden you're thinking this team actually isn't that bad. Maybe the next week you fade them, especially if there are other extenuating circumstances leading into that game that might make you want to fade them more than usual. So saving great teams is important, obviously. Like again, I said my first point was that you have to map out the rest of your season, and you have to do that right now. No question about it. At the same time, just know that as the season progresses, as long as you make it through the first few weeks, through week 8, first 2 quarters of the season, I know you're going to have fewer teams available, but you will also have more opportunities that create themselves available because of the nature of the NFL schedule. I also want to make this point. Point. It's more about which teams are good at losing than teams that are good at winning. Again, somebody who I know I won the Circa Millions contest twice in the past 3 years. Those are ATS contests. But locally, which is the same thing as Circa Survivor, by the way, all Survivor contests are relatively the same. You just got to survive. You're just competing against yourself. Locally, at one point, I won 5 Survivor contests in a row. Over the past 10 years, I won 6 out of 10 years. When it comes to my perspective and my strategy, I tend to look more at teams that are good at losing than teams that are good at winning. And again, it's kind of like contrarian to what everyone else thinks about choosing great teams. I'm more interested in fading bad teams. Let's take this weekend, for example, which is this is a tough one to talk about. My Giants, right? My New York Giants, who got their first win last week in a really weird game against the Chargers, because the Chargers had no tape on Jackson Dart, really tough to prepare for. They're traveling across the country. They don't care much about the Giants. They expect to beat them. Giants win. Wasn't entirely surprising. I wish I would have bet on the Giants last week, but I tend to not do that because they're my favorite team, and I don't want to have any bias. That being said, the Giants are probably a little fat and sassy, feeling good about themselves now. And Jackson Dart, who now does not have Malik Neighbors, was unable and did not show that he can throw the ball down the field in an NFL game in his first start. Just didn't need to. Didn't happen. Now the Saints have some film on him. The Saints have been hanging around in every single game against really good opponents, arguably one of the hardest schedules in the NFL. So the Saints, I think, going back home after competing really hard against the Bills, they almost beat the Bills. I mean, they were in that game the entire game. Saints going back home. The Giants are a good team at losing. The Saints look like they could have won a few games. The Giants, on the other hand, I know we're excited. Like Giants fans are amped up about Jackson Dart, and I think there's some reason to be amped up, right? It's a culture change. It's an energy. It's youth. Him with Scattaboo, like it's a fun tandem. But let's be real here. Without Malik Neighbors, the Giants probably have the worst wide receiver room in the NFL. And now they're going on the road. And the Saints have been very close to beating very good teams. It's an interesting spot for the Saints. And I know it's really tough to choose an 0-4 team. But that's an example of you're fading a team that's not good at winning. And that's the New York Giants. Okay, my top picks this week for week 5. I'll just mention a few and why or why not I would take them. The Colts stand out. The Colts could have won last week against the Rams. I know they allowed 460 yards, but that's the Rams at home after losing to the Eagles in a game they should have won. This is the Colts at home, and I think they're going to be very good at home all season. They qualify as the type of team who's going to play even better, right, on their home turf. Comfortable. Daniel Jones more comfortable. Already had a few wins at home. The Raiders look like a team that is falling apart. So I like the Colts the best. Bills are still in there, and mostly because the Patriots just beat the Panthers. And that's why everyone's talking so, brightly. So, oh my God, look at, Drake May. He's the future now. Like so much positive sentimentality about a Patriots team after they beat the Panthers. Think about that. This is at Orchard Park for yet another week. I feel like the Bills have been at home every week. Like, is it 3 out of 4 weeks so far? I don't know. But Bills are at home, very hard to beat. And the Patriots have looked very flawed other than last week against the Panthers. I do think you need to consider the Cardinals as well. just because the Titans are sort of a dumpster fire right now. Now, Callahan, their coach, is really going through it. Might have this team amped up. I don't feel as good about it because the Cardinals are the type of team who can blow a game like this. Like, they never play up to expectations, but they are at home and they are off a loss with extended rest against a very bad team. I would not play the Lions this week. I'm going to throw that out there. You need the Lions later in the season. I can't give away all my secrets, but would not play the Lions this week. And I already talked about the Saints as a possible outlier play for this week in Survivor. All right. Up next is not the Hollywood one. It's the Ryan Reynolds, the Oracle of the Garden State. Here he comes. All right. If you're watching this video on Substack, I didn't connect Ryan Reynolds to the same video. So that'll be in a separate video below this video, and we'll carry on with the podcast. On to the Thursday night preview. Unfortunately for the 49ers, I can only look at the Rams in this spot because 49er land it's starting to feel a lot like the 2024 49ers, which is not good for that team. Brock Purdy's questionable. Ricky Pearsall, who's been standing out as their top wide receiver at this point, questionable, might not play. In fact, this guy that I follow, his name is Ari something. I should get his name and I should promote him on the show because he's very good at injury reports. And for both Purdy and Pearsall, he anticipates sitting in week 5 because of just the aggravation of the injury and how short of a week it is. So this is not a good setup for the 49ers, who are starting to show the holes on defense. Allowed 151 yards on the ground to the Jaguars last week. The Rams are staying at home. They have good momentum now. Great performance, 460 yards last week against a 3-0 team. Their defense is second best in the NFL in sack rate. The 49ers offensive line has not been as formidable. Trent Williams is getting old. It's starting to show. The youth around him can't really hold up the same way. I could only look Rams, and I might want to consider, if I were you, I'm not a prop guy, I'm not a fantasy guy, but how can you ignore Puka Nacua, whose receiving yards are 100 yards more? He has 503. The next guy's 402, or maybe 502 to 403. You get it. 100 yards more than the next highest receiving yards mark in the NFL. Puka Nacua is killing it. His connection with Stafford is unbelievable. And the San Francisco secondary is banged up. So plus matchup for him. I hope everybody really enjoyed this show today. The contest show every Wednesday. Trying to have guests on the show more and more every week too, to make this a little more of a dynamic podcast, not just me yapping. So look forward to more guests. Until Friday, the full analysis and leans on every single week 5 game. We'll see you then. Follow me at Farley Bets on X, farleybets.substack.com. Let's go. Let's win some damn money, shall we?